There's no way he just said this. We got a shocking Cowboys injury update to bring back to you guys, as well as a couple of other star players that were absent from the last team practice. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Cowboys Digest. What's up, everybody? Welcome into Cowboys Digest. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, and today we'll be talking about a shocking injury update that occurred just today regarding one of the defensive tackles on the Dallas Cowboys. We know that Jordan Phillips was placed on the IR, but did he need to be? We'll have that and much more coming up next. But before we get into the video, I want to let you know that around 85% of you who are watching these videos are not subscribed. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. It helps me out a ton, and it allows me to make this daily Cowboys content for you. Something that I love doing, and sometimes even twice daily with the breaking news that we had yesterday regarding Carlos Watkins coming back to the Dallas Cowboys. But let's get straight into the video right here. Let's take a look. During media availability on Wednesday, Phillips spoke from the locker room and said that his wrist was fine and the move to the IR was a surprise to him. So as you know, moving to the IR makes you miss at least 4 games. And in Jordan Phillips' case, it could be even more than that, considering what just went down. So, I don't know, he said, per Nick Harris of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. That's above my pay grade. You have to ask the people making the decisions. It was a curious situation, but as Phillips added, it is what it is, I guess. Now, that doesn't sound like a player that's too happy about hitting the IR and not being involved in the lineup, but the way that he played in the first 2 games, having not even started any of them, does it come as a shock that maybe the Cowboys were looking to go in a different direction? Now, Jordan Phillips was not great in the first couple of games and didn't really do much to help solve some of the defensive line issues that the Cowboys have had over the last half decade, I would say. It's been a very long time since the Cowboys have had a dominant defensive line, and that's because they're going for speed over power and going for pass rushing over stopping the run. And anytime they come up against an elite football team, an elite offensive unit, they get exposed for being too light on the line and just not being able to sustain themselves. Now, this is very interesting here. The Dallas Cowboys defensive line took a hit on Wednesday when Jordan Phillips was placed on the injured reserve list. Dallas said the defensive tackle, who was acquired by the team last month, has a sprained wrist. The team then poached former Cowboy Carlos Watkins off Dan Quinn's Washington Commanders practice squad to bolster the depth. Now, I spoke about Carlos Watkins yesterday. I wasn't sure what his role was going to be going forward. But with Jordan Phillips now on the IR, you got to believe that Watkins is going to get in there quite a little bit and hopefully be able to stop the very formidable run game that the Baltimore Ravens are possessing every single week. Despite being 0 for 2, they're still one of the best. They're still one of the best rushing teams that the National Football League has to offer. And we take a look at some other injury reports here. The Cowboys listed 12 players on their injury report Wednesday, with 3 starters missing. Cornerback Trevon Diggs, I think that's more precautionary. I wouldn't be shocked if he's back at practice on Thursday or Friday. Wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, ankle, and defensive tackle Mazi Smith were the missing starters. Now, the interesting thing with Mazi Smith here is that he left during the early portion of practice with head athletic trainer Jim Maurer. Now, that is another area of concern, even though Mazi Smith hasn't really panned out to being that dominant guy that the Cowboys thought he could be. He's still a big body on that defensive line, and not having him in the trenches could serve as a detriment here. And like I mentioned, I think Trevon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb are more precautionary. You want to give them off days because you know that they're going to be starting, and you want to save that competitive juice for Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens. But Mazi Smith, for him to leave early in practice, whereas Diggs and Lamb were not even a part of practice, that is very concerning. And again, Mazi Smith has not lived up to the hype of being a top draft pick, but still, he is someone that can help quite a little bit on that line and has shown some flashes in the past couple of years with the Dallas Cowboys. So hopefully he can get back in there for Sunday, and hopefully it's not too serious of an injury. But as I mentioned before, Carlos Watkins going to figure to be a very important piece heading into Sunday, especially against a team that is as run-heavy as the Baltimore Ravens are, both in the quarterback position and in the running back position as well. Now, they poached him off Dan Quinn's Commanders practice squad, and he's very familiar with the schemes that the Cowboys have run in the past couple of years. Like, there have been some changes under Mike Zimmer, but the personnel is, for the most part, the same. Now, I've seen a lot of discourse on Twitter saying that the Cowboys should go back to a 3-4, that they should employ Micah Parsons as a outside linebacker, and I believe that that should be the case as well. Like, he has all the makings of being one of the more dominant linebackers in the league, but he feels a little bit light on the line when he comes up against an offensive line that is dominant and able to push you away and manage the game in the trenches. Like, at times, Micah Parsons is invisible, and I think the reason for that is because he's undersized. Despite his athleticism and great strength that he possesses, he's just not able to win those battles consistently against some of the elite left tackles in the game today. So final injury update here. Tight end Jake Ferguson was back at practice in a more limited sort of role. He sprained his left knee ligament. He was a limited participant, which is okay. I think they're really taking it slow with Ferguson, but the Baltimore Ravens' run defense is really good, and I don't know if the Cowboys are going to be able to establish any sort of momentum on that end of the ball. So having your second target back in there, your second receiving target back in for that game, is going to be a massive get for this Cowboys team. They're going to have to throw the ball quite a bit, and having Jake Ferguson back in that lineup, even though Luke Schoonmaker was one of the only bright spots against the Saints, I think that will allow them to be that much better offensively. Like, you could tell that they were missing that extra jolt, that extra bit of playmaking, and I think Ferguson can offer that, even if it's just in a more backseat kind of role. Receiver Brandon Cooks, guard Zach Martin, defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence, cornerback Jordan Lewis, and linebacker Eric Kendricks were given a rest day, which is customary for veteran players. And then safety Malik Hooker and tight end John Stevens were limited in practice. And Stevens being limited in practice could be due in part to Jake Ferguson being back in the fold. Now, this is very concerning that this was said by Jordan Phillips. That is the most concerning thing that has happened so far this season for the Cowboys. I don't know, he said, per Nick Harris. That's above my pay grade. You have to ask the people making decisions, and it makes you wonder, are we going to see Jordan Phillips back this season? I know the IR is only a minimum of 4 games, but still, like, with those comments being made and with his lack of effectiveness in the first 2 games of the season, and depending on how Carlos Watkins does going forward, it makes you wonder whether or not we're going to see Jordan Phillips from now until the end of the season. But that'll wrap it up for this episode of Cowboys Digest. Some brutal injury updates all across the board here. Hopefully it's nothing serious for CeeDee Lamb, Trevon Diggs, and Jake Ferguson, as well as Mazi Smith. But the Jordan Phillips stuff just got a little bit more interesting than it was yesterday. So thanks again for making it this far. Really appreciate it. Give me your thoughts down below. Are we reading too much into this Jordan Phillips situation? Or is it not that serious? Is it not that deep? Is Carlos Watkins going to step in and show that he belongs in the National Football League yet again? But thanks again, guys, and make sure to hit the subscribe button, because 85% of you who are watching these videos are not subscribed. So go ahead and do that. But that'll wrap it up for this episode of Cowboys Digest, and I'll see you tomorrow.